Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Professor MacArthur, and thank you, Dr. Matunta, for arranging today. I think it's excellent to see so many of you. That gives me a different message altogether. It tells me that you're at a point where you are going to be collecting data and doing your analysis, so you're on your journey to completion. Okay? So that's a point of celebration. From my side, I must apologize for the delay of starting today. But given the background of me that Professor MacArthur gave to you, now it makes my job even harder to make sure that you're satisfied. And I hope to fulfill your expectations. And I'll try even harder to do so, considering we made you wait a bit. Welcome, everybody, and welcome to those of you who've come from PMB and traveled all the way. Thank you so much for being here. Without wasting any more time, I'm going to go into our presentation and our task for today. I'm going to be looking at a very, very important phase in the research process. Now, you are familiar with the research process because you've come this far already. I'm looking at a section that today you can put into your minds are inseparable. Do not see questionnaire design and data analysis as separate issues. As soon as somebody talks about questionnaire design, you must start thinking analysis as well. Those two parts are inseparable. Okay? I say so because you often have a student coming along doing a study, they design a questionnaire, having given no thought at all to how they're going to analyze the questionnaire. They give out the questionnaire. People fill it in, they get it back, and then they realize after they take it to a statistician that that questionnaire is not really designed appropriately first to fulfill the objectives of the study. That means you got an invalid questionnaire already. Okay? And secondly, because it cannot do the level of statistics that is intended for that level of study. So a questionnaire goes out, a very superficial, poorly constructed one, and it does not allow you to do high-level statistics and analysis. What a wasted process, okay? A waste of your energy, a waste of your time, a waste of your money in the process. That's because there's no tie-up, congruency, golden thread between the objectives, the questionnaire, and the analysis. And you only realize it when you're at the point of the analysis. There's no way you can give the questionnaire again to the subjects. They've already been exposed to it. So what happens? You try and salvage the study. Let's see what we can take out of this, okay? And then you end up with a study which you've already put effort into, but now has to be salvaged. That's the first point of error. Then, of course, yes, the easy point. You can go into previous studies and look for an established questionnaire. But very often the students forget to check, does this questionnaire really fit into my study? But the fear of having to construct a questionnaire, the time constraints that every student encounters, results in them choosing a questionnaire off the shelf. Now, those off-the-shelf questionnaires do not necessarily fit into your study. So what do? You start to force it in, right? You change objectives here and there, and you say, no, this will save me time, I'm going to use it. You speak to your supervisor, let's look at this. And so what you start to do, you force an existing questionnaire into your study. That's the second biggest mistake. Because an external examiner picks it up very quickly that a student has in the literature so-and-so, they have these objectives, they've used these questionnaires, but they're not tying up. Then the second part, analysis and all of that is based on this new questionnaire, which of course doesn't meet your objectives. So what's happened now? You're doing an analysis on something else. So when an outsider comes in to read, an external examiner reads the thesis, they all are a bit disjointed. Because in the beginning you were thinking something, Then to save yourself the effort of questionnaire design, you used an established questionnaire. You followed through with that questionnaire, but the second part of your thesis is not talking to the first part of your thesis. So, second big mistake. The learning curve from that, you can use established questionnaires, but you may adapt it to suit your study. Do not force an existing questionnaire into your study. So today then, I'm left with the task of helping you design a questionnaire and show you what are the important aspects of questionnaire design. If you thought that was a task, the bigger task is data analysis. But fortunately, we probably will have tea by then and you'll be ready for that big task. Okay? So, without going any further, a little bit of insight into what I'm going to cover today. I'm going to look at questionnaire design. Of course, a bit of intro, background, the definition, when we use questionnaires, advantages. But the crux of that part of the presentation is going to be on construction of a questionnaire. Questionnaire construction. What do we think about when we are designing a questionnaire? Okay? That then is going to lead us directly into the ultimate reason why we have a questionnaire, analysis. And we're going to take data analysis from the angle of descriptive and inferential stats. And by now you would know there are numerous inferential statistics. So I've just selected 5 of the commonly used ones because once you use one kind of statistic, you can apply that to many different kinds of statistics. The analysis is almost the same, all right? So we're going to cover 5 different types of statistics, more or less in a complete fashion, so that you can apply it to others before we conclude. I'd also like to say that you don't have to write the slides. We'll be taking down a list of all email addresses, so we'll email the slides to you. What you can take down is additional things that I discuss if you want to. Now, these are basic stuff that you know, but I'm going to cover it with you. What is a questionnaire? We talk about designing a questionnaire. What is it? A questionnaire is a pre-formulated document. It's a pre-formulated document with very clear set of questions. The questions that are in such a way that it allows the respondents to record their answers in very simple ways. Now remember, there are open-ended questionnaires and closed-ended questionnaires, but today, because we are dealing predominantly with quantitative data analysis, our questionnaires are going to be predominantly closed-ended, okay? Because we're engaging in quantitative analysis. So, the subject is given very close alternatives, and they've got to select an answer from that. Very easily done with a tick or a cross in the appropriate box. But it is important to know when to use a questionnaire. And this is important for you too, because in your methodology chapter, you don't just say, I'm using a questionnaire. You're going to go ahead and say why you find the questionnaire the most appropriate data collection technique. Remember, your methodology chapter means everything must be justified. Whatever you choose to do must have a proper reason. So you must be able to say why you choose the questionnaire as your data collection technique. And very important reasons, and the first one being the most important, when you know precisely what information you want. If you really don't know what the study is going to be about, what are the key variables, that means you're still in exploration stage, okay? That means you can't use a questionnaire. You may have to use exploratory approaches like focus groups, brainstorming, and then into other interview kind of methodologies. But if you know exactly what your study is about, what are the key variables after conceptualization, if you have a theoretical framework of your study, then only you will use the questionnaire. Okay? Not otherwise. Because what are you going to ask people? What are you going to question them or provide statements to which they must respond if you yourself don't know what your study is about? So remember, you only will use the questionnaire when you know exactly what your variables in play are. And just to give you some insight into why I say this, let's just say, now I know you all come from different disciplines, so it's going to be a bit difficult for me to just use an example that everybody's going to understand. So I'm going to take a very simple case scenario, which everyone obviously knows, even if you're not in a particular discipline. Suppose we've decided we want to look at job satisfaction. Now, if I go around the room here and ask everybody, what keeps you happy? What keeps you satisfied in your job? Okay? One might say pay, the other might say promotion, the other might say working conditions, the other might say supervisor-subordinate relations, and the list can go on. We can come out with 100 different items that influences job satisfaction. But in a study, can we study 100 variables? No. We'll be doing analysis paralysis, aiming to do everything and accomplishing nothing. So what do? You conceptualize your study. You engage in exploration by reading textbooks, by reading journal articles, by reading the newspapers to know what's happening in the context, and by going to the organization where you're going to do your study, speak to managers, speak to people, get a sense of what influences them, what determines their job satisfaction, what their needs are, what they want, okay? After you've got this whole array of potential issues or concepts that are influencing your dependent variable, your key aspect of your study, you need to ask yourself, by engaging in exploration, what came out as the prioritized factors that influences job satisfaction in that organization? Not yours, you the researcher. You would have gone out into the field and said, in that organization, what is it that influences those particular people? And you might have come up with pay, promotion opportunities, and working conditions. And these then become your independent variables. You didn't sit in your lounge, thumbs up, and come up with the variables, okay? You did a whole phase of conceptualization. You did a whole phase of thinking, exploration, speaking to people. You've got your variables. Once you've got this theoretical framework, you might even ask yourself, what kind of other variables influence, have a mediating effect, okay? Or what specific biographical variables will influence my study, all right? And you might even have that in mind. The important thing is, you've got to have a very well conceptualized understanding of your study before you even think questionnaire design, or before you even think the questionnaire is my data collection method. So that fulfills the first when to use, when you know precisely what information is needed. So you know now, I'm looking only at pay, promotion, and working conditions and its influence on job satisfaction in this organization, right? Should you want to do the study in another organization, you can't now take that conceptualization to that context. You got to reconceptualize in terms of that context. What is critical in that environment? And it might so happen that in that environment, working conditions is not important, but training opportunities is. So, at the end of the day, you've got to conceptualize your study relevant to the context in which you are going to apply it. You don't want to design a questionnaire which is now talking about working conditions, and when you go to the organization, people are giving you all disagrees on that item, they're not really interested in that item, and in your one question in the end, Is there anything you like to comment on that this questionnaire does not accommodate? Everybody's talking about it. This organization does not provide us training opportunities. I am not trained for the job I do. They do not provide training. They do not understand my training needs. That last question is now telling you, you identified your variable incorrectly. Okay? It puts a little bit of a slur on the validity of your study because you might have not conceptualized properly and you now got one wrong variable in the study. So I say that the phase of conceptualization of coming up with this theoretical framework is the most important. Don't rush it. Because if you rush it, it means your questionnaire is going to be focusing on the wrong variables. It then means that your questionnaire design in terms of the items are going to be wrong, and then your questionnaire might have a low level of validity. Okay? So just be very sure that when you conceptualize your study, you have a very clear framework, theoretical framework that you are going to adopt. Once you have that, the rest is a piece of cake. That's the hardest part, conceptualizing your study. So let's start cutting this piece of cake. When the researcher knows precisely what information is needed, we know precisely what information is needed. This is our study for today. Okay? When large numbers of people are to be reached in different geographical locations, now you're also justifying why you can't use another technique. For example, if people are scattered all around South Africa or everywhere else, then it means you're going to have to travel to them. That means additional cost. That means flight costs and so forth. It means additional time and all of that. Hence, you can justify using a questionnaire, which with all our technology today can be emailed and so forth. Okay? So when people are geographically dispersed, it means your cost is going to increase. To avoid that, you justify the use of a questionnaire. When groups of people can be assembled to whom questionnaires can be administered and collected immediately, like now. Okay? If I were to get an impression of how masters and doctoral students feel at studying at UKZN, this would be more or less an ideal opportunity. Okay? So when you find, and the same in corporate, if you find that there is a board meeting going to be taking place this particular week, and you know that your sample is only board members or your sample is senior management, that would be your ideal opportunity to distribute questionnaires. Alright? So these are ways by which you can justify the use of your questionnaire. Now, there are many advantages to using the questionnaire, as there are a few disadvantages. But don't let these advantages just attract you into using the questionnaire. Use the questionnaire because it's the right data collection method to use. Okay? The first thing is you can collect data fairly easily. Yes, it takes a bit of time to design the questionnaire, but once you give it out to 60 people in the room, you're sure to get 60 more or less usable questionnaires back. Okay? And that depends on how you monitor that process. The information from questionnaires, as you will see in this session, is very easily coded. So you can code it easily, you can capture it easily, and then analyze it thereafter. Okay? As opposed to if you have to hold interviews, it becomes a long session of questions, recording, answers, and all of that, and then the analysis takes much longer as well. Okay? It also benefits the community if your measures are validated and reliable. That's a very important aspect of the questionnaire. You will not use a questionnaire that is not valid because it's just as good as not doing your field work, and it's just as good as not doing your analysis. Okay? Do not use an invalid questionnaire. It means immediately you're going to get wrong answers. So what's the point in doing the research in the first place? Okay? Don't use questionnaires that are not reliable. Again, there's no point. There's no conclusive result. But yet, if you use a valid and reliable questionnaire, which I'm going to show you, on how you determine that, then you know that that study is going to contribute. Okay, it's giving a true result. It's often a catharsis for respondents. Very often you might find that because your topic is current, it's affecting so many people, that's why you chose it, right? There are many people who want to say, they're itching to say something about it. They want an avenue where they can speak about it. But they're keeping quiet about it. There's no opportunity, there's no avenue. And who knows, your questionnaire could be what they're really waiting for. Okay? To vent perhaps their anger in some sense, to vent their strong feelings, to vent opinions about something that truly matters to them and the community. So, your questionnaire, well designed for your current topic, will give people an avenue to express themselves. Okay, that's a bit of background to questionnaires and questionnaire design. The most important part of it all for you to know, if you are using the questionnaire, conceptualize your study perfectly first. Don't design a questionnaire which you later realize, oops, I haven't touched the right variables. Too late. It's gone out, it's filled in, perhaps to 600 people, a lot of cost, a lot of time. There's nothing that can be done. Okay? So be very clear on your proper conceptualization of your topic. Are there any questions at this part before I move on to the most crucial part, questionnaire design? Okay, so let's move to then the design of the questionnaire, the construction of the questionnaire. And at this point, I'm going to send out two single-page handouts. If you could just take one and pass it on. I think if you could just pass it forward, there's a gentleman sharing here. Alright, I trust you all have a questionnaire. We are looking at the design or the construction of a questionnaire. There are three very important elements in designing a questionnaire. The first one being